Today on CityCast DC, maybe you've seen one of those action-packed ads that are aimed at recruiting new members of the U.S. Park Police. These ads show like helicopters racing through the sky and guys with tactical gear deploying. One of them is set to Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses. If you're someone who thinks of the Park Police as this nice little squad that patrols the monuments, this might leave you scratching your head. And it turns out you're not alone. The Park Police is on a massive hiring binge, something that would more than double its size. They've made claims about wanting to be DC's premier law enforcement agency. This, as you might expect, has some locals worried. The Park Police, after all, is part of the federal government, and it ultimately answers to President Trump, and not to the people they'd be policing in and around Washington. Or the jungle, as that ad would have you believe. Olivia George from The Washington Post has been covering this controversy. She's here to explain. Today is Monday, December 15th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, before we get into the show, I want to give folks one more chance to sign up for our membership campaign.
And just a huge, huge, huge thank you to everyone who became a CityCast DC neighbor during our fall campaign and during our winter campaign last week. Seriously, it really means the world, and it supports what we do. And we really can't do what we do unless we have the support of these members.
You know, local media is, it's no secret, local media around the country is getting its hat handed to it. One of the really cool things about doing CityCast is, one, we work with all kinds of people in the local media, in addition to being local media ourselves, and we get a chance to highlight stories and like really bring them to you in some depth that you might not be seeing otherwise. It feels like a interesting conversation, and the people who've joined, the people who come to our events, kind of carry that with them. We wind up having like really substantive, interesting conversations with people who care a lot about the place they live, and also people who love a good story every now and then.
The event that we had in October was such a highlight for all of us, and we're excited to do more of those in 2026. If you've been thinking about joining and just haven't yet, do it now. You can do that at membership.citycast.fm. If just 10 more of you join, we'll meet our goals. And so please, go ahead, hit that button, as it were, membership.citycast.fm. And we so appreciate your support enabling the work we do.
All right, let's get into it. Hey, Olivia, welcome back.
Hi, great to be with you.
I saw this ad on Monday Night Football for the Park Police. It was a recruiting ad, and it was nuts. It was like an action movie, you know, Apocalypse Now, helicopters zooming in. A bunch of cops, you know, in tactical gear jumping out of a vehicle with this sort of aggro soundtrack. And I was thinking, like, this is the Park Police? But this is, as you've been reporting, part of a potential effort to transform this organization. What is the goal here?
So, great question. And I must say I haven't seen that ad. I will have to keep a closer eye out for it. It sounds interesting. So, Park Police is interesting to me, and I'm glad it's interesting to other people too. My colleague and I reported a little earlier this year about this really big recruitment blitz underway in the agency, and that was kind of unfurling following a number of other steps that we've seen the federal police agency take in recent months. We've seen their leadership kind of be restructured to move them one step closer to the White House. We've seen a tightened relationship with immigration enforcement in DC. And so what it all amounts to at the moment still kind of depends on what you ask. You know, there are people that are really outraged and accusing the agency of mission creep. But then there are also people that I've been speaking to inside Park Police and the Interior Department more broadly who say, you know, look, this is an agency that has kind of been overlooked or ignored. And it really, you know, needs this kind of infusion of resources.
I mean, there's been this language about we're going to become the premier law enforcement agency of the District of Columbia. They're offering $70,000 signing bonuses. What does it mean to be the premier law enforcement agency of the District of Columbia? Do they have a definition for that?
So that phrase that you're pulling on was included in this internal document from the Interior Department that my colleague and I obtained a little earlier this year. And what was interesting about that was not only that kind of, somewhat flashy statement or, ambitious goal, but that in this what appeared to be a kind of a strategy memo type document, there was kind of the explicit goal of keeping the city safe, quote, regardless of inaction, both by local police and local elected officials. And that stuck out to me, and I think to other people, because we've seen local elected officials, especially the DC Council, kind of be on the receiving end of scorn from the Trump administration and other officials. But it was interesting to me that they kind of lumped in the local police department in that bucket too. When I reached out to DC Police for comment on that, they declined. And in my conversations with, the communications staff at the Interior Department, they have not responded to any specific questions and have declined to discuss personnel matters and kind of instead have issued somewhat vague statements. So the question of what it means to be the premier law enforcement agency is an interesting one, and kind of one that I'm like continually checking in with people to see how this recruitment blitz and other kind of investments in the agencies, how they play out over the next few months.
All right. So for now, I mean, people who live in Washington, we are not strangers to seeing the park police around. What exactly, up to the Trump administration, what exactly are they supposed to be doing? What is their mission and their jurisdiction?
So the park police, they're part of the Interior Department, and they, broadly speaking, are tasked with protecting national parkland and monuments. Now, we know, that in DC, it's somewhat unusual. There's a big, a big swath of the city is national parkland. Park police only have offices in the DC region, in San Francisco, and in New York City. So they're not dotted around all over the country. They're really kind of focused in these specific areas. It's important to note, too, though, that they do have, my understanding is they have jurisdiction across all of DC.
Meaning if they happen to be on their way to a national park property and they see a purse snatching, they can apprehend the perp.
That's my understanding, yes. So one other example of the type of work that park police does, they, I believe, have the only aviation law enforcement unit in the district. And so remember the terrible shooting that happened right before Thanksgiving, in which 2 members of the National Guard were shot in downtown DC. At that time, the park police helicopter was out tending to a different call, I think in the Great Falls area. And they got radioed in to assist with the shooting response. And they airlifted one of the Guards members to a hospital. In my conversations with people at the agency, they do like to emphasize that they don't just stand around the monuments all day. There are sort of lots of other examples of the way that they contribute to the public safety response in the city. But now with sort of recent steps that have been taken, we're seeing critics come forward and say, wait a minute, is this really kind of what the vision for the agency is supposed to be and should be?
Well, right. So in DC, as we've talked about in CityCast, a lot of the weird little grassy traffic triangles in your neighborhood may well be National Park Service property, or probably are National Park Service property. But even if they weren't, this is an agency that can do law enforcement there, even if it has up to now not, as you mentioned. Earlier this year, you reported on how the Park Police Chief is now apparently reporting directly to the Interior Secretary, which brings them, bureaucratically a lot closer to the White House and its priorities. Have there been changes that ensued as a result of that, or is there a sort of a wisdom from your reporting on what that likely means once you get to the street level?
So we saw, I believe it was in August, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum deputize immigration officers to patrol with the Park Police and also roll back more restrictive police pursuit policies. And in that specific announcement, the loosening of police car chases or their ability to engage in pursuits, we saw the secretary on social media specifically thank the president for giving the green light to do so. So we're still, I think it's still a relationship that I am trying to understand better, with kind of a particular eye to what the repercussions will be for residents. But it's just another example of how we are seeing it seems almost more attention paid to this arm of law enforcement than we've seen in previous administrations. And in my conversation with someone at the Park Police Union, who's really celebrated some of these changes as a necessary infusion of resources, he said we've been asking for help and asking for updated equipment, updated buildings, increased manpower for years and years under both Republican and Democratic administrations. And in his view, their calls are kind of finally being answered.
Are they subject to District of Columbia laws about things like police chasing? I know they're not subject to the policies of the Metropolitan Police Department as directed by the mayor of DC, but when it's actually something that is legislated, ban on certain kinds of chokeholds or whatever, is that a thing that would cover any law enforcement who happen to be working in DC?
Another great question. So they don't, if we take the specific example of police pursuits, the Park Police operate under their own separate policy. In fact, a lot of the pursuits that we've seen Park Police engage in recently would be quite kind of explicitly not allowed under the policy that local city police officers have to adhere to. And I believe that exists in other examples of kind of what they're allowed to engage in and not that they have their own policies.
New Year's plans are always tough. You don't want to go out and spend $5 bajillion to get into some stuffy, overcrowded club, but staying in isn't really an option. Look no further than the Black Cat New Year's Swing Ball. It's DC's most legendary and longest-running big band night, with non-stop music from Peaches O'Dell and her big band orchestra. Plus, games and fun for just $35, it is one of the best deals in town. No dress code and a relaxed atmosphere that caters to everyone. Grab your tickets at blackcatdc.com now. That's blackcatdc.com.
Hey, life can change in an instant, and that can feel especially true in the holiday and winter months. One moment everything feels normal, and the next someone else's mistake turns your world upside down. That's why you need a team you can count on. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, fighting for neighbors hurt by medical malpractice, wrongful deaths, and serious injuries. They don't just settle quickly or push papers. They dig in, fight hard, and make sure every client gets the justice they deserve. And here's something we love. They're a longtime supporter of CityCast because just like us, they care about this community and the people who call it home. So if you or someone you care about has been hurt this season, don't wait. Call NACE Law Group. They'll stand with you, fight for your family, and make sure your rights are protected so you can focus on what matters most. Visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. That's WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. Finding fresh holiday gifts for loved ones year after year can be tough, but in my family, there's one thing that never, ever fails. That's pictures of my kids, or sometimes me. That's where Aura Frames comes in. It's truly the gift that keeps on giving. You preload the photos before it ships, then you keep adding from anywhere, anytime. Upload unlimited photo and video. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code CITYCAST at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code CITYCAST. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
So we know that the Metropolitan Police Department, which obviously answers to the representatives, the elected representatives of the people who they patrol, we know their cops on the front end get a lot of training in dealing with sort of difficult, tense, volatile urban policing situations. Has that historically been true of the Park Police? Is it true now?
In Park Police's push to expand, on their website, they are advertising this streamlined virtual hiring process, promising a quick turnaround. And that language in particular is something that we have seen a cluster of Democratic senators really seize on and point to and say, look, hey, this is hasty. We are seeing a hiring spree that is waiving certain standards, whether that's, in-person tests, psychological testing, in-person fitness testing, and questions about the potentially negative repercussions of those, that kind of streamlined process have been put to the Secretary of the Interior Department. And those senators, in a letter that they sent to the Secretary on Monday, specifically said, hey, those processes are different and appear to be more relaxed than the process that the DC, the local police department is following. When I put those questions to the Interior Department, they didn't engage with them specifically, but I'm hoping to deepen my understanding in the weeks ahead.
I mean, I think as DC learned itself the hard way, like 30 years ago, when they rapidly expanded the police department, when you lower your standards on the front end, you get a lot more lawsuits on the back end. Your paper, The Post, had, a couple of years ago, ran a crusading series of editorials about a bad Park Police shooting on a parkway. It was their jurisdiction. It was a pretty ugly story. Is that sort of thing more common in this police department than in MPD?
I haven't crunched those numbers, but I think that would be a really important point of comparison. On that note, I'll emphasize that Park Police's presence in DC is really, quite microscopic compared to the presence of the DC Police Department, just in terms of numbers. The most up-to-date kind of head count of sworn officers that Park Police has in DC that I've been given put their total at 289 sworn officers. So even if the Park Police are successful in fulfilling their most optimistic expansion effort in the next 6 or so months, which is around 450 officers. 450 officers, I was told, was the initial goal. That's since shrunk to 300. But even if they meet their most optimistic expansion, MPD would remain 4 times larger than Park Police. I think the difference in scale is important to note, that this hiring blitz is quite substantial. It's quite a colossal expansion from what they have currently, but even still, they would be much, much smaller in terms of sworn officers than MPD.
So one thing that shapes the culture of MPD and probably every big city police department is that at the end of the day, the people who, control their budget and sign their paychecks answer to the voters, which is to say the people who are the recipients of the policing. And I think this shapes the culture. It means that, when you get a call saying, hey, this neighborhood's out of control, the residents want it to be safe again, you're going to jump to it, because if you don't, that could lead to trouble down the line. And similarly, it may exercise some restraint on the way you treat civilians. The Park Police, as a federal agency, doesn't that is not part of their culture. Do you have a sense of like how it shapes the culture, like whether it's at Washington or in San Francisco, like in terms of like responsiveness to neighbors who might either want more policing or want different behaviors?
I don't think I've yet had the chance to speak to enough people within inside the agency to kind of, in good faith, paint with a broad brush. What I will say is that officers that I have spoken to, share and will express similar sentiments that we often hear from people in law enforcement, that they are committed to keeping their community safe and they're drawn to the job as kind of a public service role. What we have seen, though, is with the surge of federal officers in DC, not just Park Police, but the increased presence of ATF, FBI, HSI, et cetera, down kind of the alphabet soup of it all. I think one of the reasons why we've seen some elected officials and advocacy groups and a lot of residents be so rattled by that increase is not just because in terms of, numbers, but also because there has not been clear communication and about what all of these kind of overlapping jurisdictions and related but somewhat different policies when it comes to things like covering your face or when you can engage in a police pursuit, et cetera, be clearly articulated to the public. And I think that that's where some frustration has stirred among residents, towards leaders is for a need for more clarity on what it means to have all of these agencies who already had, longstanding relationships working together, but for those relationships to be even more kind of entrenched and expansive.
So Senate Democrats have been decrying this as a move to exploit their jurisdiction, and have a bunch of questions they've asked. And I'm curious what evidence there are that any of this has been done. Like do they coordinate with ICE on arrests, which MPD is not supposed to do? Do they coordinate with MPD? I'm curious where this alleged exploitation is happening. So
if we take one step back to your question, so you're right. We've seen 4 Democratic senators send quite a harsh letter to Secretary Burgum describing how alarmed they are that, Park Police is seeking to double their ranks in DC. They, have issued a kind of laundry list of questions about everything from the cost of this expansion, the objectives behind it, uncertainty about the hiring process, that's being used and if corners are being cut, et cetera, et cetera. And my understanding of the kind of intent behind this effort, which, the lead author of which was Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon. He's the top Democrat on a Senate subcommittee that basically oversees the Interior Department's budget, was that they really didn't feel that they had adequate information about this quite seismic increase in personnel in DC. The letter is littered with, accusations and kind of alarm bell ringing. But my understanding is that it was really rooted in a desire for more information from the Interior Department about questions such as immigration enforcement, but also an effort to kind of try and raise the public profile of certain concerns around what this expansion could mean for residents and people visiting the Capitol.
So the irony is that there's people who see this as an effort to marginalize the Metropolitan Police Department, the one that answers to the voters. The Metropolitan Police Department chief the last couple of years was a former head of the Park Police.
That's right. And not just former chief of the Park Police, but spent, I think, 24 years at Park Police. So is really, really steeped in the agency. Pamela Smith worked for Park Police, not just in DC, but also in New York and San Francisco. So she is, really, has spent just an enormous proportion of her career at Park Police.
So of the people who are concerned, we know the senators, but you mentioned there's some local residents who have a lot of concerns about this. I mean, if you boil it all down, what's their major fear?
As it's been articulated to me, the major fear is that an expansion of a police force that is viewed as being less accountable to residents than the local police force is underfoot. Meanwhile, there are, a lot of unanswered questions, and kind of there's been a lack of transparency is how those are the types of things that I'm hearing from people at a time when we have a president who has, continually expressed dissatisfaction with the state of play in DC, and also shown a desire to, really flex the muscles of the federal government, not just in DC that is uniquely vulnerable, but in cities across the country, that Park Police might be an additional tool through which he can leave his fingerprints on DC. Again, that's, I speak to people who counter that narrative and just say this is, an overdue boost of resources that Park Police has long deserved. But I think that those are the fears, that it's an expansion of a somewhat less, of a force that is somewhat less responsive to community concerns and community oversight.
So these Democratic senators have demanded some answers. The Park Police has until December 19th to respond. What do you see happening?
I had a somewhat interesting, brief email interaction with the folks at the Interior Department. Of course, reached out to them when I got wind of this letter, and was really interested in their response, and hopeful that they would provide me and readers with some additional context. And initially, I got back a very short response just saying, we don't respond to congressional correspondence through the media. And that was that. And then a few hours later, I heard from a separate spokesperson who issued a longer statement that didn't address, really any of the specific questions that the senators had raised, or that I was hoping for context on in my email, but took the opportunity to describe the senators' letter as, not surprising, but disgraceful. They accused them of trying to curtail President Trump's pro-law enforcement agenda, and that this was really kind of like a smear campaign or attack on the good people of the U.S. Park Police. Relatedly, I also, got a statement from the Park Police Union, who rejected the suggestion that the senators had made that the Trump administration is using police officers to advance political goals. The union also noted that, in their opinion, the senators have kind of been silent as the police, as Park Police has been calling for additional resources and for a solution to their staffing crisis. The union invites any senator to ride with officers, talk to residents exactly, but that none of them have taken the union up on that offer. So am I expecting to see, a response to the senators by December 19th? I guess maybe I'm not holding my breath, but I really don't know. I will obviously continue to ask these questions. I would be grateful for more information from the Interior Department. I'm curious who they're seeing apply. Are they seeing officers from the DC Police Department, for example, considering switching gears and joining Park Police? I think that would be really interesting. So I guess I won't try and predict the future, but I will say that I'll continue paying attention to this, and that I hope that we can all learn a little bit more.
Well, as you do, I hope you'll come back and tell us more about it.
I hope so too. I'd love to.
Thanks for being here. It's Olivia George from the Washington Post.
And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.